So I want to start out by just kind of acknowledging that what we're looking at tonight and what I want to explore and what I've been exploring, I guess, my whole life, and one of the things that I feel that Judaism encourages us to explore is what the heck puzzle piece are we, right? Rabbi Rami Shapiro used to do this beautiful teaching about when he was first working with kids in a Jewish, like after school program or something like that. And he would gather the kids together, and he was always trying to get them to understand that they were important. And so they would create this project where they would have, like, whatever it was like a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle of the world. That famous picture taken by some of the early astronauts who saw the world from space. And that picture has profoundly affected many, many people. The first time we actually saw ourselves from a distance, where we saw where we lived as this blue marble, as some people have described it, but we saw it from a distance and recognized, like, wow, it's really a place, and it's not the way that I see it, it's the way that the universe sees it. And that photograph is so evocative and beautiful. So that was the image that he chose, and there's, of course, a jigsaw puzzle made of it. So he would have the kids work on this, this puzzle, and they talked about teamwork, and they talked about each person is important, and they talked about how everything fits together, and they talked about all of these things as they were working on this puzzle. But what the kids didn't know is that Rami had pocketed one piece of the puzzle of the black sky. Right, you know the photo, right? It's the globe. It's beautiful. It's blue and green and white, and it's floating in this black emptiness. And he had pocketed one piece, and they would work on this puzzle and do their learning for a couple of weeks, and finally they would get down to the end, and there was this one piece missing, and the kids would be incensed. And they would search everywhere trying to find that one piece. And Rami would say, oh, it's no big deal. It's just one little black piece of sky. We know what it's supposed to look like. And they're like, no, Rami, no. And he'd go, oh, well, look, we could just take a piece of cardboard and color it in black and put it underneath, and then it would be like it wasn't missing. And they'd go, no, Rami, no, we've got to find that one piece of the puzzle. And he'd let them suffer for a little while. And eventually he would go, oh, is this what you're looking for? And there would be the piece. And they'd pop the piece into place. And he would say, now, this piece was so ordinary. And yet you knew that it was essential. You would not rest unless that piece was put into place, even though you knew what it was supposed to look like. Even though we could come up with kind of a fake and put it underneath, you weren't satisfied with that because you knew that every piece was essential. And without it, this puzzle was not complete. And if that's true of this puzzle, how much more true is it of you in the puzzle of humanity? That each and every one of us, no matter how insignificant our life may seem, is crucial to the whole. And without it, without your story, without your unique way of holding that space, even if it's just the black space of emptiness, is crucial. And from a Jewish lens, this is a core, essential teaching. So I'm going to ask, we're going to take a look at a couple of ways that the Torah expresses this. To start with. And so I'd ask Dorit to bring up the first slide for me, please. So we have this famous quote from Genesis, line 27, verse 27 in chapter 1. And God created the human being as its shadow image. In the shadow image of God, it created it. Male and female, retaining and opening, it created them. So if you're familiar with this line, you can see that I've taken a few liberties with it. The first liberty, the way that you may have heard this line before, is, and God created the human being in its image, or in the likeness of God, and male and female, God created them. So my translation of B'Tselem, in the image of, in the likeness of, even in the reflection of, maybe, as shadow image, comes from a pun, a Hebrew pun. So Salal means shadow, and Salem means image. And I think the idea that we are God's shadow is an effective way of conveying the idea that I think that this scripture is trying to get across to us, is that there's an intimate connection between the divine and the material, between the spiritual and the physical, between God and humanity, as inextricably linked energies, or inextricably linked even entities. In the same way that our shadow is inextricably linked from us, we are inextricably linked from God. Whatever you think of that God is. And that's a whole other session, right? But for now, let's just say that there's a creative force in the universe of which we are a direct part. And that when it moves, we move. That we are connected. And we have got, there's a way in which it is the instigator and we are the reaction, but we are connected. And then this bizarre, beautiful, weird second half of the sentence, male and female, which is usually how these two words are translated, zachar, male, v'nekeva, and female. But the origin of those roots are memory and a pierced, something that is pierced, that is open, that's porous, that has porosity, that has flow. And I like to think, instead of kind of in the, when we hear male and female, it's very difficult for us to break away from what we mean by that sociologically. So I want to break away from that instead and think of it as retaining, as memory does, and opening as a porosity allows things to flow. And then God, created them, but we only had one to begin with. And so there's a little hint here that we are complicated, that we are created of multiple energies. We're not simple beings. We're complicated beings. And that, for me, leads us to our story, because our stories are complicated. Our stories change, our stories shift, our dynamics shift, everything moves. We don't stay fixed in one part of our story for very long, because like all stories, if that happens, it's over. The story's dead. We have to continually have new things interject and retroject and project in order for a story to be a story, in order for a life to be a life. Lives are not static. They are very dynamic, and every single person is living in that dynamic, is living in that constant flow of what was, what is, and what might be. And I think that the Torah understands this about us and actually celebrates it and actually provokes us to embrace that idea. So the next place that it pops up, in my opinion, is if we are going to accept this piece of scripture that says that we are created inextricably linked with the Creator, and that's going to end up being a core question for most of us. What does that mean? What does it mean that I'm connected to God? What does it mean that I'm a physical being that has a spirit? What is that all about? What happens to my spirit when I die? Why do I have to die? Where am I going? What's this all about? What's the meaning? Blah, 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 right? We have a lot of angst around this idea that we are connected to something that's unknowable, undomesticatable. We try to domesticate God with religion, but it doesn't work very well, as most of us know, right? God doesn't do our bidding very well. God is very feral for most of us. And yet we are connected to it, and we are here, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, emanating that energy. What does that mean? So the Torah nicely or not so nicely gives us a few nudges, gives us a few hints of what that might mean. And the next slide is the next place that it comes up, where we get a little wink and a nod of what it's all about. And we're in the 12th chapter of Genesis, in the first line, in the Torah portion called Lech Lecha, which is what this is, what this quote is. It says, go to yourself. That's one way of understanding it. Another way might be go. In other words, you cannot stay fixed. Even if we're not going to yourself necessarily, you have to keep moving. You have to keep going. You can't get stuck. You can't get fixed. Your story has to continually unfold. Lech lecha could be read lecha lecha, to yourself. It could be read lech lech, go. And the way that is normally read is lech lecha, go to you, go to yourself. So going to yourself means figuring out, what is this one? What is this one here? Who am I? What am I supposed to be doing? Or what am I not supposed to be doing? Or what am I here to deliver? What am I here to receive? And then finally, the next slide takes us to the kind of closing the circle. Nope, not that one. Yep, that one. So we're still in Torah here, Exodus 3:14. So this is after humanity has kind of gelled enough that we are differentiating into little pods, if you will, little units that are identity units. And this identity unit of Judaism is just about to form. It hasn't quite formed yet, but it's on its way to forming. It's going from individual to family to clan to something bigger than clan. And we're right in that moment of that clan expanding into something that will ultimately be called a nation or a people. And Moses has got a job to do, which is liberating that segment of humanity to head off on that journey to Lech Lecha, to go to themselves. And Moses is like, this is sketch, God. Like, you're setting me up for a pretty gnarly situation, because in order to break off, we have to like upset the power structure in a major way. And that power structure has got every resource and is pretty brutal. And you're telling me I'm supposed to go and say, I'm sorry, Pharaoh, but this group of people needs to come with me because we are on a special project. And who shall I tell sent me there? Who shall I say sent me? And this is God's response. And God said to Moses, I will be that which I will be. And God said, so that's what you should say to the children of Israel. I will be has sent me to you. I will be. This is what we are created in the image of, my friends. This is what we are the shadow of. I will be what I will be. Never static, never fixed, always changing, always unfolding, constantly becoming. Wow, really? That is a really hard job. Are you kidding me? How am I going to do that? It's crazy. Like, why can't I be fixed? Why can't I just do the same darn thing? I have 2 cats. They eat the exact same food every single day, every meal. I know, look, I see a couple of you grimacing when I say that, right? Like, if I had to do that, no, I would, I know, right? Would it not be good? They're good. They get just as excited. Now, with my 17-year-old cat is just as excited every morning to see that exact same food his entire life as he was when he was a kitten. I'm not that. I know I'm not that. I'm constantly, even in something as essential as how I nourish myself, I need change. I need dynamic. I need diversity. I need switching it up and switching it down. I need to eat really clean for some period of time. And I need to eat really rough and raunchy really some periods of time. And I need to be hungry and I need to be full and I need to go through this whole wild range of experiences that have to do with something as basic as just nourishing myself. So there's something special going on with this wacko species of which we are a part that demands that we figure out how to be the truest version of ourselves every moment of our life. Just the truest version of ourselves. And what's so very heartbreaking and hard about that is that who we were last year and who we are this year might be dramatically different. And we have to know how to navigate those changes. So that's kind of the internal work of what I'm talking about here. Now I wanted to turn it on you a little bit and think about, how do you do it? How do you do it? How do you do that? How do you deal with the fact that you are 10 years older than you were 10 years ago? And you look 10 years older than you did 10 years ago, unless you don't, in which case that's a whole other story. How do you navigate your own changes? So I want to ask you a question. We'll take a second to think about it, and then I want to invite you to put up 1 to 5 word answers, really simple, really lean, in the chat. So here's the basic question. In what nonverbal ways do you, on a daily basis, tell your story? In what nonverbal ways? This isn't talking to somebody, this isn't writing. In what nonverbal ways do you, on a daily basis, tell your story? Not your whole story, but one of those little fragments of who you are. Take a sec to think about it, and then enter whatever you come up with in the chat. Beautiful. Love this. So, how we wear our clothes, how we use our memory, how do we greet each other, how we take care of ourselves or those beings that we share life with. Singing, movement, having the same breakfast every day, must be a good one. Hiking, hugging, having a latte on your porch, deciding, being conscientious about where we put our attention, being clear about our choices, knowing what we're doing, being attentive to it. Clothes and jewelry, oh yeah. Taking time to look at the moon or the trees, making things for people, engaging in small rituals of care, taking care of other beings, remembering to smile, bathing, watering the garden, choosing soft fabrics to wear. Beautiful. So beautiful. All of these. Thank you so much. Cuddling with your cats, cuddling with your children, telling people that you love them, studying, cloud watching, meditating. Gorgeous. Right? when we stop and realize that these are ways that we are expressing ourselves into the world, that is part of our story. And I hazard a guess that if you don't wear the exact same clothes every day, that's probably okay with you. And in fact, that's probably desirable, right? Like, you'd probably feel kind of odd to wear the exact same clothes every day. Or it would be another way of making some kind of a statement to the world. We know that if there's somebody in our midst who wears the exact same outfit every single day, there's a way in which that's part of them telling their story to us, right? And how we live with the subtlety of our choices as an expression of who we are in the world. And if we just ratchet up our consciousness just one little notch that says, yeah, that was a choice. Yeah, I have choice and I'm using it and I'm making something of that choice. And I'm, and sometimes, oh, Gewalt, I really wanted to wear the purple shirt, but it's in the laundry. So now I have to make a different choice. I have to make a different statement. So now I'm going to grab this other thing. And sometimes you're not going to be 100% you. And I just want to come to say, yeah, that's right. Because that's a really hard job, being you 100% of the time, pure, a perfect reflection of the divine, that part of the shadow that is just defined and articulate and graciously beaming godliness in the world. You're not always going to be there. Sometimes the light, you're right. You look at some shadows and they're all a mess, or they've got they've got duplicates. You know how that works? You're not always going to be a pristine version of the godliness that is inside you. That's part of the nature of being human. That's part of the nature of our messy, ever-changing, ever-unfolding, schmutzig lives. And there will be times in your life where you're between selves. And it's hard to be there. And you're not going to know what the next step is. And you're going to be you're going to be too close to what you've just left and not deep enough into what is coming next to be clear about who you are, what it's all about. And that's a distressing and difficult time. That's the moment between slavery in Egypt and freedom in the desert. That's being in the middle of a sea that hopefully has parted enough for you to get through. If you make it from one part of your life to the next, you have crossed a Dead Sea. You've crossed through an impossible situation. And that's, it's a core part of the Jewish story, is leaving one identity to find a new one. And it's not easy. And it's not all sweetness and light. And people get grumpy and their worst comes out and they get snarky and they complain. They beg to go back. What? We had onions in Egypt. Here, we have manna. This is us. This is us. And I adjure you to embrace that part of this journey as well. And don't cause yourself any additional stress. It's stressful enough to be a dynamic creature that is constantly in change and in flux. You don't need to beat yourself up for that on top of everything else. So let's take a look at how the tradition then views that individuality. And I love this final slide from the Talmud. The rabbis are in the middle of a big conversation about the difference between penalties for how do you find monetary crimes that have done monetary damage and can be recompensed with a monetary reward. Now, you break something, it had value. How much, you know, did you break it intentionally, unintentionally, out of your own clumsiness? Were you being negligent? Blah, 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 blah. There's a bazillion ways that you can do, you know, crimes or commit, infractions, offenses that have to do with the material, the physical, stuff that can be replaced, versus crimes of the soul, or of life, that threaten or damage or offend life. So these two categories, dinim mamon and dinim nafshot. What's the word I'm looking for? Infractions of monetary infractions, or capital infractions, capital crimes. So they're in the middle of this whole conversation about this. And their basic thrust is, look, a monetary crime can be corrected. A capital crime cannot be corrected. You destroy a part of somebody's soul, whether that is a psychological or a physical death. And we don't have the means to correct that. And you will probably recognize this next piece, where one of the rabbis says, a person who takes a life, it's as if they destroyed a whole world. A person who saves a life, it is as if they have saved a whole world, right? And from that comment, they say, because we know that if Adam HaRishon, if Adam, the first human being, had been killed, all of humanity would have been destroyed. Dorit, if you could bring that slide back up, because I actually hadn't gotten there yet, but I'm close. Thank you, thank you. And then one of the rabbis responds by saying, yeah, a human being mints many coins from the same mold, and they all resemble each other. And we value them. It's money. But the King of Kings, the Holy Blessed One, minted every person from the mold of the first person, Adam, and yet not one of them resembles another. Even though it comes from the same source. Can you imagine what an image this is? You've got the same mold, and you pour in your metal or your clay or your whatever it is that you're putting in the mold, and you press the mold, and you pull out the impression, and every time it comes out different, even though you're putting it in the exact same mold. And this beautiful way of understanding our commonality and our individuality is so, I think, beautifully expressed in this teaching from the Talmud.